All right. I think we are live. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to each and every one of you to another episode of the Stephan Report. I'm so happy to be joined by all of you. I hope that you have all had a wonderful Friday. Hopefully you slept well, all warm and fuzzy, knowing that Julius Malema is a convicted criminal and that he should spend about 5 years in prison. Will he spend 5 years in prison? Probably not, right? We all know how it works here in South Africa. But still, it's nice to know that there is at least one magistrate. And I do think that we should have some hearts in chat for the magistrate because it took a lot of courage for that magistrate to go, you know what, I don't care. I know that my life is going to be in danger. I know that I'm going to get threatened, which is exactly what happened. But ultimately, I'm still going to follow the law because it matters. Now, I've made a video earlier today, and a lot of you have already watched it. I want to thank you for the incredible support that you've given me on that video, where I showcased Julius Malema threatening the judge. I showed you what is the penalty for threatening a judge in South Africa. And I should just maybe sort of mention, there is an actual reason why you are not allowed to threaten a judge or a magistrate or an official of the court in South Africa. You can criticize if you want politicians, you can criticize the police, you can criticize pretty much everyone in whichever way you want, because there's still, to some extent, the facade of free speech in South Africa. But a judge or a magistrate is an absolute no-go. And the reason for it is, they are considered to be incapable of defending themselves against such criticism. The judiciary, or the criminal justice system, must at all times be impartial. So you can't have a magistrate or a judge going on social media and saying, this Julius Malema guy is an idiot or whatever, because that would immediately put into question this magistrate's or the judge's ability to judiciate over future court cases against EFF members, or maybe even against, Julius Malema. The man is a criminal and a terrorist, so, he's probably going to be in court a lot of times in his life. And so you have to be incredibly, incredibly careful. And that's why there are such severe penalties on criticisms of justices in South Africa, or even just court officials. So it's important to understand that. And of course, Julius Malema immediately broke the law after being released under warning. So technically speaking, in a just and righteous country, Julius Malema would already have been in jail this morning already, following the criticisms and the insults that he lobbed against the magistrate. But hey, we don't live in a just and a righteous society, and so of course that's just never going to happen. Very quickly though, CR, Milmar, Anita, Jaguar, Mr. Bongi, Penny, David, Deja Porter, and Matters of Mad Minds. How are you guys doing? I'm very happy to have all of you here. Thank you so much for joining me. So today, I'm not going to go over all of that again. I already made a video. I already gave you all of the evidence you need there. Instead, I want to talk about something a little bit different. And I guess we should start with, first, let me just bring up what sort of prompted this video, but it's not, or this discussion rather, not the video, the live stream is going to happen either way. But what prompted this discussion, for me at least, is this morning Willem Petzer released a video. I don't know if you guys have seen it already, but if you haven't, you should watch it. It's an interesting video. There's some key things that I disagree on with Willem Petzer. And the reason for it is Willem Petzer makes the argument that the MK, the EFF, and the ANC, or at least the MK and the EFF, is going to merge. He first makes the argument that the EFF is going to suffer great losses, and he sort of assumes that Julius Malema going to prison is a foregone conclusion. And as a result of that, the EFF will basically either disintegrate entirely, or they'll just be absorbed into the MK. And he shows where Jacob Zuma and Malema is standing right in front of a camera, and Jacob Zuma is saying that it doesn't make sense for the EFF and the MK to be divided by white people, because apparently the only division of the MK and the EFF is white people, I guess we're forgetting why Julius Malema absolutely turned on Jacob Zuma and what ultimately led to the creation of the EFF in the first place. It was nothing to do with white people. Julius Malema wanted to steal. Jacob Zuma wouldn't let him steal as much as he wanted, and so he left and he formed his own political party where he hoped that he could eventually also start stealing at the level of Jacob Zuma. This is well documented, right? I'm adding the whole he wants to steal just because he proved it afterwards with the VBS scandal and then just all of the fraud and the corruption that follows in the wake of the EFF, the ANC, and the MK. But fundamentally, it had nothing to do with white people, right? From our perspective, and I do speak for the majority of white people when I say this, Mr. Zuma and Mr. Malema, we genuinely could not care less about you. We do not view you as people to look up to or people to look out for. You are wildly overestimating your importance in our lives. The only thing that we dislike about you is the way in which you're destroying our country. That's really it. Outside of that, if you guys just stop doing that, we literally would not care less about you. But of course, it is literally your person that is destroying the country. And so as a result of that, it becomes important for us to remove you from the leadership of this country. But I promise you, it has nothing to do with you. It just has to do with us wanting to save South Africa, not really with you personally. But we're gonna be talking about all of that and more. So first, let's get to some of the disagreements that I have with Willem Petzer's video. The first is that I do not believe that it is a foregone conclusion that Julius Malema goes to prison. Right? I think in that there is there's an assumption that justice will prevail in South Africa, which I'm just not that convinced by. Julius Malema is going to appeal this, and he's probably not going to get jail. Even though he fired a gun in public in the middle of a very densely populated area, he's not going to go to jail, right? And even if he were to go to jail, I don't believe that's the reason why the EFF and the MK are going to merge. In fact, I have said that there is going to be a shakeup in the political landscape of South Africa for a few months now. There's multiple live streams of me making this exact point. So it has nothing to do whether Julius Malema goes to prison, doesn't go to prison. It doesn't matter. There is a problem that the racist terrorists in the ANC, the EFF, and the MK face that is insurmountable. Neither of these parties can get over this one fundamental flaw. They are running out of racist terrorists that's willing to support them. And you might say, wait, what do you mean? Okay, so very often on this channel, we focus on the fact that the ANC has technically not lost support. You would remember that I've made multiple videos on that. We've even discussed it during live streams. If you take the ANC, the EFF, and the MK and you put their support together, they have over 60% of the vote. If you go back to 1994, the ANC, this was before the split of the EFF and the MK, the ANC sits at 67% of the vote. The NP, which is the second largest party at that point, sits at about 21% of the vote. And when you look at 2024 versus 1994, all you really see is that the ANC support has sort of been split between three different parties, and the NP's vote has largely gone to the DA, right? That's really the reality here. The DA has not really been able to capture anyone new. The EFF and the MK has basically lost no support. And that's a really dire thing. It means that the majority of this country still believes in communism as the goal, right? The city on the hill with the light shining, and we should all get there. This morning, however, as I'm listening to Willem Petzer's video, something strikes me, and it's interesting when you just change your perspective. So when you just change the angle through which you view a specific event, how that event takes on a whole new meaning and brings about a whole new level of understanding. It is true that the ANC technically the big A, big N, big C, ANC, EFF, MK included, have not lost votes. But it's untrue, or have not lost the percentile in votes. But it's untrue that they have not lost support. Because in 1994, doesn't matter whichever race group you want to throw in there, everyone votes. We have, I think, it's difficult to get exact numbers from that time, but the last time I checked, it's something like less than 5 million voting-aged citizens didn't vote in that election. So a lot of people vote, and the ANC gets 67% of the vote. In 2024, the big ANC gets just over 60% of the vote, with the MK and the EFF included. But something else has happened. Between 15 and 20 million voting-aged South Africans did not vote. They did not even waste their time to go to the ballot box. Now, why would that be? It is acceptable and even expected in almost every democracy when people lose the ability to influence an election, when people start to feel like their vote just doesn't matter, that they will stop voting, right? But if you're a revolutionary and you're a communist at heart, just a voter, voting for any of the big parties guarantees that your communism revolution doesn't end. Right? So you have every reason to go and vote. If you want to be a communist, but you don't necessarily want to have the country descend into absolute chaos and anarchy, you vote for the ANC. If you want to be a communist, but you do want a violent revolution, you vote for the EFF. If you want to be a communist, but you also want to be, sort of part of the rapid economic transformation group, you vote for the MK. You have 3 options for who to vote for, and you have a very good guarantee that since the country is made up of 80% of black people, you're going to have at least one party that gets into power, or at least gets into enough power. So why would we have between 15 and 20 million registered or voting-aged adults in this country just completely check out? Well, in that lies the secret to the panic that we're seeing in the last 6 months or so from the ANC. Now, it's important to understand when you look at what is happening within the ANC, and I'll show you guys this because it sort of sums up everything you need to know. Now, I can show you guys hundreds of posts. It's all on my X. You can literally just follow me on X, and you will see, because I'm basically tagging every single post that I see on from relative people or relevant people. But everyone at the moment in South Africa is blaming AfriForum and the white man for what happened to Julius Malema. And there's this desperate attempt for the last year. You guys will know, ever since President Trump got into office, there's been this desperate attempt from the freedom forces of South Africa to paint AfriForum as a terrorist organization. Of course, no one ever points to the exact crime that AfriForum commits, just that it's treasonous. Now, what exactly is that charge of treason? It's telling the world what the ANC is ultimately doing. That's the charge of treason, and apparently that is illegal. No one explains why, but never mind, right? Ultimately, just listen to this. I read it in the video this morning as well. The main message we are being told here by the racist AfriForum is that if we dare stand up for black people, dare stand up for the marginalized, and dare stand up for our generational mission, we will be targeted. So, what's the problem? Why now? Why have we never seen the ANC go after the DA in the same way? Why have we never seen the freedom forces really attack the DA with the same sort of vigor and vitriol? Look, there will always be attacks, right? And they will always point out how the DA is this, that, or the other. But there's never been a call to effectively criminalize the DA, to remove the DA or remove the DA's ability to speak. Why would we suddenly start talking, Zuma and Malema suddenly start talking about how they should come back together? Why would Fikile Mbalula, the Secretary General of the ANC, come to the defense of Julius Malema and actually call him brother? Now, I wasn't convinced. I was convinced that the MK and the EFF will merge. I wasn't convinced yet that the ANC would, but I did say, if you guys remember last week, I made this live stream, and I say to you, if Paul Mashatile becomes the leader of the ANC, we will see a remerger between the MK, the EFF, and the ANC. Maybe not in terms of the MK and the EFF rejoining the ANC, but a sort of new tripartite alliance that steps in. Right? So when the tripartite alliance existed, you had the communists of South Africa, you had COSATU, and you had the ANC, and they formed the tripartite alliance. And this is possible that there would be a new one. But I did say that I don't believe Fikile Mbalula or Cyril Ramaphosa's faction within the ANC would be in support of this, because they are vehemently against the EFF and the MK. So what is this change? Because it is an interesting one. Why suddenly is the pure communist faction of the ANC willing to work with the revolutionary communists of the EFF as well as the RET communists of the MK? Well, ideas are interesting things. You see, the DA never really offered an alternative to the ANC. They didn't offer a new path to the ANC. What the DA merely offered was the same path, but walked better. Right? So we're not going to change the direction of the country. We're not going to move away from transformation as a central goal and a central tenet of this country. We're just going to make it better. We're just going to be more efficient at it. This is why when you look at Jordan Neal Lewis's budget in the Western Cape, he himself described it as a transformational budget. It's a budget that takes from the rich and gives to the poor. Right? So the DA was never really a new idea. It was the same idea, just executed better. And that's not a danger to the ANC, because the ANC can very easily just say, look at these white people, look at what they want to do to you. The Freedom Front is a whole different ballgame. AfriForum is a different ballgame. You see, because the one thing that the ANC feared more than anything in this country, and why they have spent the last 32 years trying to ensure that the people of South Africa view right-wing conservatism as a blight, is it's a new idea. See, one liberal isn't different from another liberal. They're all liberals, right? They're just arguing over how liberal does one need to be. So in America, for example, if you're super liberal, you're arguing about what even is a woman. If you're just somewhat liberal, you're arguing about, what is a woman, but also women might be good and we should give women more power in society, even though we can't necessarily agree on what a woman is, but you're still arguing over the same things. You're just sort of taking different approaches on getting to the answer. Everyone is sort of asking the same questions and coming to the same conclusions, just some slower than others. But conservatism is a new idea. It's the idea that says, well, we know what a woman is. We don't need to ask that question. Instead, let's determine what is not a woman. And it just so happens that a man with a penis is not a woman. And this is dangerous. This is very dangerous. You see, because communism and socialism really, operates in the realm of utopia. It is utopian thinking. It is selling the people this idea that life can be perfect. And as a result of this, you need a lot of idealistic views. You need to hold this idealistic component within your viewpoint that says that there is some magical way in which we can all come together and sing Kumbaya around the fireplace. Conservatism removes the idealistic view and says, this is reality. Life is messy. Societies are messy. People coming together is messy. And the best that we can do is provide you with the freedom to pursue your own goals. We can't pursue those goals for you because there's just too many of you and each of you have your own goals. So instead, how about you take responsibility for your actions and then everyone else takes responsibility for theirs? And our job is just to ensure that no one threatens or kills anyone else and no one takes what does not belong to them. This is a new idea. And ideas are dangerous because human beings like ideas. So it doesn't matter whether Julius Malema goes to jail, doesn't go to jail. It doesn't matter what happens or doesn't happen with Cyril Ramaphosa. The end result is the following. The ANC, the EFF, and the MK must merge. They must come back together. Because that 15 to 20 million non-voters at the moment in South Africa, they're new. They're looking for a new idea. Because the current ideas are no longer working. So if you're the leader of the MK, the EFF, or the ANC, you realize one fundamental reality. You're running out of revolutionaries. The communist revolutionaries that once followed you and was willing to follow you into the depths of hell, they're not really there anymore. You know, you look at, for example, the Institute of Race Relations in South Africa, and every single poll that they do find the same thing. South Africans in the main are not very extreme. You do have your extremists in the ANC, the EFF, and the MK, but the mainstream South African, not that extreme, not that interested in violent revolution. And I do believe that there is a truth to this because we can look at history and see what is the reality that has happened in Africa in every single country where colonialism was overthrown. So in every single country, the vast majority of them within the first decade transcends into violent coups d'etats and revolutions within the first decade. The rest, decade 2. So Africa has a tendency after colonial rule ends to transcend into revolution within 2 decades. While South Africa is in its 4th decade. Well, 3rd decade, heading to our 4th. 32 years after apartheid ended. And there's been no violent revolution. The EFF has not picked up their guns and started violently revolting against the system. The MK, with all of their Zulu warriors, have not decided to do this. The ANC has not decided to do this. Why? Well, again, we go back to the coups d'etats of Africa. And there's a book that, if you haven't read it yet, you absolutely should. It's called Coup d'etat. I can't remember the author right now, but the book itself is called Coup d'etat. In the book, the guy looked at every single coup d'etat and violent revolution that has ever been carried out in Africa. And there's 2 things that all violent revolutionaries, leaders of revolutions, look for before they start their revolution. The first is support. Is there an actual base that is willing to support the violent revolution? And before you go, but Stephen, we've seen the EFF burn down cities and towns. We've seen the protest. Protesting and revolution are 2 very different things. In a protest, I'm asking my followers to just go burn stuff down. Right? Yeah, okay, cool. There's no enemy. If I go to a revolution, I am telling my followers, pick up your guns and go to war against the white man. Now there's a number of new threats. There's a threat of death. There's a threat of retaliation. And in this instance, there's not so much of an appetite for it. Because if there was, the EFF would already have done it. Because the second question that violent revolutionaries ask is, what is the appetite of the non-revolutionary citizens? So, in other words, if I am going to get my base to start the revolution, what is going to be the reaction from the public on my revolution? So, in either of these cases, the leaders of these revolutions have found that there's not enough support for my revolution, and the blowback of my revolution will be so severe that I will likely end up dead as a result of it. So what do you do now? You have this ever-shrinking base of revolutionaries, but now you have ever more parties fighting over who's controlling the revolutionaries. Well, you have to come back together. That is the only way that you get right back to 60%. And if you look at the most current polling, this might be the first time ever that neither the EFF, MK, or ANC together gets to 60% of the vote. Because right now, the ANC is polling at anywhere between 33 and 38%. MK is down from their high at 15% to 10%. The EFF is scrambling between 5 and 7%. You put those numbers together, and that's not 60% of the vote. Suggesting that a lot of people are walking over. A lot of people are going to a new idea. The DA is growing, and that is absolutely true, but they're growing because they are the same idea as the ANC. And I believe that just like the ANC, there will be a natural cap where the DA will just not be able to get over that hump, because the DA will also not be able to deliver a prosperous future for South Africa. It will just not happen. Because when transformation is the main goal of your political sphere, it's impossible. Because in order to have transformation as the main goal of your political vehicle, the government needs to be in charge of that transformation. You can't allow the public to do it. You can't allow the markets to do it. And when the government is the main vehicle and the government is the main one in charge, it's inefficient. It's just not going to work. So fundamentally, the DA will not offer that solution. But AfriForum will. The Freedom Front Plus will. Because their message is sound. Their message to South Africans everywhere is that if you care about Christianity, about conservative values, about the rule of law, and about culture, vote for us. We're not going to change our rules. We believe that cultures should be allowed to thrive individually in South Africa. And as a result of that, if you vote for us, that's exactly what we're going to give you. We're going to federalize the country. We're going to ensure that if you are of Sepedi, ancestry, or of Zulu ancestry, you can live among your own people and you can thrive among your own people. But it's also not going to be forced. If you listen to what the Freedom Front is saying, if you don't want to live among your own people, but you instead want to live among like-minded people, there's going to be spaces for that as well, right? So those who don't want to mix, they don't have to mix, and those who do want to mix, they can mix. And everyone will be free to pursue their own dreams and their own hopes. This is dangerous because this is a new idea. It's the antithesis of the idea that has led us to this moment in South Africa, where nothing works, the economy is in the dump, it's not growing, in spite of what the president of South Africa wants to tell you, green shoots and all. Of course, the green shoots gets wiped out in literally an afternoon, and it doesn't look like it's coming back. So fundamentally, I do believe that this is the main purpose. And guys, you have to see it to believe it. You have to see the amount of attacks that is lobbed at the moment against just white people, against AfriForum, against the establishment of justice. Julius Malema broke the law. He is going to serve time in prison if justice is to be served for breaking the law. But instead, the focus isn't on Julius Malema breaking the law and finally getting what he deserves for it. The focus instead here is that Julius Malema was the victim of a political pursuit. This is politics. You even have people like Richard Pitthouse, who's apparently a professor and a researcher. And now, just listen to the framing here, because this framing is insane. He says the 5-year sentence for Julius Malema is excessive, arguing that prison should be reserved for those who pose a direct threat to public safety. That's not true. And this is why, by the way, if you're thinking about going to university, you may as well skip it, because these are the kinds of people that's going to be teaching you. People who don't even understand the basic reason for why prison exists. Prison has nothing to do with a threat to public safety. At its core, prison is a punishment. You committed a crime, and you must pay for that crime. Now, as a byproduct of that, we remove violent people that are threats to society from society. But that's a byproduct. That's not the main reason or the main goal. The main goal is punishment for what you've done. And this is the basic fundamental building blocks of a justice system. If you break the law, you must pay for breaking the law. And that's why prison exists. And don't bring that nonsense to me of fines or of community service. This is nonsense. If you shoot a gun in a public space, you must go to jail. That is a severe crime. It's not the same as jaywalking, right? It's not the same as driving without your license present. You have a license, you just don't have it on you. That's a slap on the wrist, or just go show your license to prove that you can actually drive, right? That's not the same as firing a gun into the air. That, by the way, stray bullets, as I said earlier today in my video, 200 children a year killed in the Western Cape as a result of stray bullets. 200 children. So it's not a victimless crime. Julius Malema was lucky in that no one died when he fired 5 shots into the air. But that's grace, that's mercy. That has nothing to do with his actions. He did not aim the gun towards no one. He aimed the gun recklessly into the air and pulled the trigger. But this is the kind of people that is now running this. And remember, I guarantee you this Professor Richard Pitthouse, also part of the globalist elite, and I have another story here that I'll actually show you guys that proves to you that South Africa is one giant experiment. In fact, Helen Zille said it herself. It's from her own mouth. And these are the kinds of people like Mr. Pitthouse here who buy into this. And this is where you get the asinine systems like you have in America, where people can shoplift up to an amount of $1,000 and never even get prosecuted. The police won't even come to do anything about you. And what do you get? You get thousands of stores closing down and leaving the state. You're saying, what's the point? I'm getting robbed blind because you've effectively given criminals the green light to just, go steal, as long as you don't steal more than $1,000. Criminal behavior that is left unpunished will lead to more criminal behavior. This is why prisons exist, because they are punishment for being a criminal. They happen to also remove violent facets from our society, and for that it is good. But this is why we should bring back the death penalty, because there are certain criminals for who we say there's no point. You were evil enough that we don't believe that you should just be removed from society or that prison is a just punishment for you. We believe death is the only just punishment for your actions. That's why countries for hundreds of years had jail and the death penalty. Because the idea is, if jail isn't a large enough punishment for your crimes, then death is. That's the ultimate punishment for your crimes. So this professor is just a nutcase that doesn't know anything about the real world because he's a liberal. And liberals have this idea that if you just treat evil people nicely, and if you just treat everyone with little gloves, they'll just become little Teletubbies. You know, if you're just really nice to Iran, they'll stop funding terrorist organizations around the world. They'll stop killing their own citizens. You just need to be really nice. Because really, the only reason Khamenei was slaughtering almost 40,000 of his own people was because America was mean to him. But if America was really nice to him, he'd suddenly, just turn into a Teletubby and start singing to the sun, It's like, what the hell are you talking about? That's not how life works. In the real world, when you have someone threaten to kill you, it's best to believe them. Because if you don't believe them and they're serious, that's a problem. In the real world, when someone breaks the law, it's best to punish them harshly so that no one else follows suit. Because if Julius Malema got off here, and you have to think about this, insofar as prison is punishment for crime, it is also a signal to other criminals. If Julius Malema ends up not going to jail, what signal does that send to other people in the country? You can just fire your gun wherever you want? Because that's the message. You're not going to jail. You can fire a gun in the middle of an open space and nothing will happen to you. That's the message. I'm sorry, but what kind of message is that? It's unacceptable. And so fundamentally, to just bring it all back, this is, in my opinion, the future of South Africa. There will be a merger between the EFF and the MK and the ANC because there's no other option. They can't do anything else. They can't do anything else. Because if they don't reunite, they will continue to sort of dwindle. And they will continue to lose relevance. And in time, and what I'm saying in time, I really do mean in 10, 15, 20 years, you will most likely see a party like the Freedom Front at 20% of the vote. As more and more black people wake up and say, but hold on, I don't see any point in voting for communism when this is the result. And by the way, you do see it already. There are so many black people that I speak to on a daily basis that tell me they're sick and tired of the communism. They're sick and tired of the revolutionary voices in this country. And yes, they're still a minority, but it all starts with a minority. That's all you need. Because that minority will influence others. And before you know it, it'll be a wildfire. I don't know if I told you guys this. I do know I mentioned it during the Truth Report live stream. But I was very lucky in that I found out that there's quite a few people in my church that works for the Freedom Front, that works for Lex Libertas. I've been invited into Lex Libertas, so I'm going to be joining them on a couple of things. Not officially, but I'm going to be part of some of the stuff happening in Lex Libertas, stuff that I'm really excited for. But one of the ladies there who knows the lady that deals with all of the donations for the Freedom Front Plus. So basically, if you want to make a huge donation, so everyone can donate to the Freedom Front Plus, but if you want to make a huge donation to the Freedom Front Plus, you have to phone this lady, and she'll then accept your donation, and you make your demands to this lady. And according to this lady, they have never received this much money in their entire existence from black people, black business owners, black influential people phoning the Freedom Front Plus and saying, take my money. I want to give you money. And they give them all the same answer. If you give us this money, that's great, but you have to understand these are our principles. If you want us to change our principles, there's no discussion, you can keep your money. And the answer from these black donors, I'm donating to you because of your principles. I don't want you to change your principles. So there is hope. Right now it's a slither, but that's all you need. It's all you need is that tiny little slither. Because that's what ultimately turns into a tsunami. And I believe, in my heart of hearts, that the ANC, the EFF, and the MK, they understand this. They understand this. They know that this is coming. They know that it's happening. And there's nothing that they can do to stop it unless they can kill this idea right now. And I think that's why you're going to see things get worse. The ANC, the EFF, and the MK are going to come after everyone. And I'll give you guys just a quick bit of evidence here. Fikile Mbalula this morning writes the following. The NDR, that's the National Democratic Revolution, seeks to end colonialism of a special type, which is underpinned by three interrelated, antagonistic contradictions that cannot be resolved through mere reforms: race, class, and gender. These manifest as national oppression based on race, class superexploitation of black and women workers, and the triple oppression of women by race, class, and gender. Eliminating or abolishing these combined sources of social conflict and injustice is at the heart of our revolution. That's a lot of words to effectively say that white people are evil and white people are oppressors. And if you are going to free black people and women from the oppression that they consistently experience, you must defeat white people. And he actually says it explicitly in the next bit. The NDR also seeks to liberate the white community from the false ideology of racial superiority and the insecurities of privilege, thus building a truly non-racial society. In other words, we are oppressing you, discriminating against you, and slaughtering you for your own good. You don't understand it yet, but we are liberating you from your racial superiority. Now, you might argue, but Stefan, racial superiority isn't good. And I agree with you. No one should believe that their race is superior to any other. But framing matters. You see, if I, as a white man, say, I do not believe that you, as a black man having done nothing, gets to claim my hard work and take for yourself that which I have built, I am now a racial supremacist. They've said it themselves. Those of us who do not want to be part of the transformation are white supremacists. If you don't want to give your stuff to black people who have done nothing to deserve it, then you are a white supremacist. So in other words, we, people who don't want to give away our stuff, are white supremacists by definition. Never mind the fact that genuine white supremacy are people like the KKK, right? There's an actual definition there. But you have to understand, communists love changing definitions. And so white supremacy now becomes a catch-all term for anyone who isn't a communist. If you are a communist, you've been liberated. If you are not a communist, then you must be liberated. See the language there. So those whites that do not wish to accept their communist masters, they will be liberated or, as communists have proved throughout history, killed. Those are your options. Communism throughout history has made it very clear. Those are the only options. There is no third secret option. This is why when President Trump offered white Afrikaners and minorities in South Africa a way out, the ability to escape South Africa's oppression, what did the ANC do? They got very angry. And in fact, in so many words, they said that these white people are merely trying to escape responsibility for apartheid. They're trying to escape the responsibility that they have towards transformation. So in other words, these white people will not allow us to exact our vengeance on them. And that makes them, ding, 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 white supremacists. So, ladies and gentlemen, when the ANC passes another race law, when another farmer is murdered, when Julius Malema sings "Kill the Boer, kill the farmer," you have to understand that from the perspective of ANC Secretary General Fikile Mbalula and the violent terrorist communist forces around him, this is for your own good. They're helping you. They need you to see the error of your ways, that your capitalist mindset is evil and wicked. And unless you accept that that is wicked and evil, you'll be killed. It's as simple as that. Make with that what you will. Let's quickly hear what you guys have to say before we go on to the next story. Skull Legend, how you doing, sir? Ryan De Jager, how you doing? All parties beside the FF are Ubuntu, racist, communist, corrupt Marxists. How am I responsible for the sins of my forefathers? It angers me to think that these dinosaurs are driving a narrative that doesn't exist anymore. Oh, but it's not even a case of the sins of your ancestors, because the vast majority of them don't even know what apartheid was, right? They have no idea what apartheid was. They believe that apartheid was some genocide that was exercised on black people, even though the actual numbers does not even bear that out. There's about 4.5 million black people in 1902, 1903. By 1994, there's over 30 million. If it was a genocide, it was a very bad genocide. So ultimately, it's just there's no actual information about what the actual injustices of apartheid was. And I'm not saying that the apartheid wasn't was a just system, or that there wasn't injustices under apartheid. Of course there were, right? Of course there were many. But the problem is that none of these people actually know what those problems were. Because if they understood what those problems were, they would also understand how to actually deal with it. But, it's not important because it's not actually what it's meant to achieve. The idea is that you make apartheid this ultimate evil thing that just exists. And that's why whenever they speak about apartheid, it's always apartheid, a crime against humanity. They will always say that, a crime against humanity. Never mind the fact that the only people who ever said that it is a crime against humanity is the left-wing United Nations. Right? So literally, it is the communists that branded it as a crime against humanity so that the communists could now wield it as a weapon against those who aren't necessarily bought into it. So yeah, there's a lot more to this. Parzival, how you doing, bro? Will rather rule in hell before they serve in heaven. Dr. Mulder confirmed this yesterday during a talk with Chris Wyatt. People with that communistic mindset will tell you straight up, you will fall in line, because that's the only real option that they have available to them, right? There really is no other option. Cambodia did the same thing, erase the past and claim you built the present. Yeah, but that's usually exactly what communists do, right? That is the baseline for all communism. It is to erase what was so that no one actually remembers what it was and how it was, and then pretend like what it is now is so much better than what it was. The Soviet Union did the same thing. While people were literally starving, something that never happened under the Tsar. Look, under the Tsar, people had very few rights, but most Russians didn't even care about that. That's why the Bolsheviks were not actually the Bolsheviks. It was the Mensheviks, right? They were a minority group that then rebranded themselves as the majority, even though they never had the majority on their side, because the majority of peasants in Russia were perfectly happy with the Tsar. They didn't even care. It was like, oh, well, whatever, because the Tsar, for the most part, if you were just a peasant, the Tsar left you alone, right? You could just be a peasant and do your own thing. The communists did not leave you alone. If you were a peasant, you had to come work in the factories, because there's nothing that Marxists hate more than peasants. You see, because peasants or farmers, they called them peasants, but the real thing is farmers. Farmers don't really care who's in charge as long as you leave them alone. And this is, funnily enough, something that we pick up with farmers around the world. No matter which country you go to, when you go to a farming communities tend to be incredibly insular. They sort of do their own thing and they don't really care as long as you don't bother them. And the Marxists hated these people, hated them, because they stood in the way of the communist revolution. They didn't really care about all of this communist stuff. They just wanted to be left alone. And they can't be reasoned with. You'll never dislodge those ideas from their minds, especially as the propaganda is ongoing. Rich Walker, I wouldn't say so. Yes, they can't be reasoned with on a broad scale or a general scale, but you can absolutely reason individually with some. You're never going to change the vast majority, which is why I have said for multiple months on this channel, and I don't want to use the word civil war, because I will hope with all hope, and I will pray with all my power that never actually transpires. But I don't know how you deal with communists in your society any other way. Because the hardline communist is incompatible with decent society. You can't have a decent society with communists living among you. It will never work, because the communist will always be the infection that destroys the society. Always. They are a disease in society. And the only thing I could come up with that ultimately deals with them in such a way that you don't, like, it doesn't end in killing, because that's not what we want. That's not what anyone should ever want, is you need to expel communists from your country. You need to put them on a boat and say, go live somewhere else. You're not welcome here. And the world needs to effectively divide into communist countries and free countries. Those who are of communist make, they can go live with all their communist friends in their hellscapes and their hellholes. And those who are of free minds, they can live with the capitalists, where you are free to pursue your own goals and your own dreams. That's the only way, because if you keep trying to force people to live together, I don't see how that doesn't end with incredible bloodshed. I just don't. I don't see a way out, because at their core, communism is about revolution. At its core, communism is an us versus them ideology. It's a religion. It was created to be a religion. That is why it hates Christianity. It replaces Christianity, and it kills Christians whenever it takes power, because at its core, it is an us versus them. The state has to become absolute. So how do you live with a communist in your society in peace? I don't see how that works. You need a separation. And yes, that does ultimately mean that you're going to have countries being ripped apart. The United States is not going to be the United States. It's not going to have 50 states. South Africa is not going to be South Africa. It's not going to have 9 provinces. But it's the only way this works, is for like-minded people to come together and expel those that don't agree. And by the way, the communists will be free to do the same. If you're a capitalist, leave. Right? We don't want you here. Communism squashed individually and nonconformity. Cadillac, pretty true. The commies will never stay on their side, though. No, they'll probably start waging war, but then at least it's one country against another, and it's not civil war, which is the thing that we're trying to sort of escape from. It can be eradicated, but that indoctrination took decades, a couple of generations. It will take a couple of generations to do rehab, ideological subversion, Yuri Bezmenov. So I love Yuri. I've watched his talk probably 3 or 4 times already at this point. I think the mistake that Yuri makes is he believes that communism is simply an indoctrination of otherwise normal, ordinary people. I don't believe that. You see, the communist mantra had at its core this idea that humans are blank slates, right? And that you can teach a human anything. You can change any human being into anything you want them to be. I don't believe that's the case. Instead, I think some human beings have a tremendous propensity for evil. And some human beings are drawn to the ideas of control. And those are the people who become communists. Because it affords them an ideology that speaks to their deepest desires. The desire to control others. And I don't believe that there is any reprogramming that removes that desire. That desire is ingrained because it's part and partial. There's only one thing that I believe can change that, and that's Christ. If you come to faith, if you accept Jesus Christ and Jesus starts working in your heart, absolutely, right? Because there's nothing that's impossible for God. But human beings trying to reprogram, it would be like saying we could reprogram a psychopath. There's been plenty of attempts to try and reconstitute psychopaths. It's never worked. We don't know enough. We don't understand how these things work. So we don't know how to reprogram such a person. And even if we did know, would we feel comfortable with doing that? You know, like, because then you're also opening the door for evil people to reprogram you, right? To be as evil as they are. So that's just a realm that we should not go in. Instead, I believe in freedom, even for communists to be free. And so my argument is, if you're a communist, I don't want to kill you. I don't want anything to happen to you. I just don't want to live with you. Right? It's as simple as that. Go live somewhere else. I don't want you here. I don't agree with that, but okay, to each their own. Gio, I would be interested to know why you don't agree with that. So let me ask you this, Gio. Before we continue, let me ask you this. Do you believe that most people are fundamentally good? Actually, I'll ask the whole of chat this. Do you believe that most people are fundamentally good? Is the main idea of communism that they can create a utopia? Yes. It is the idea that utopia is possible. We can get to utopia. The video late, what you're referring to is a framing effect. At the 55-minute mark, we have a group on Facebook teaching the psychology of all this. Wild Bear, how you doing, bro? Yes, but he's saying, no, we are all evil. I believe that nobody is born evil. It is circumstance that changes that. And this ties in with Christianity. Joe, actually, it doesn't tie in with Christianity because Christianity teaches that we are all born evil. For we are all born into a wicked world, into a corrupted world. Christianity does not teach that we are born good. In fact, the very opposite. The day that Adam and Eve ate from the fruit, they brought corruption into the world. This means that every single human that is born is corrupt to their core. Jesus says it. The flesh has zero interest in the things of God. Zero. The heart does not yearn for God. It does not want God. In fact, the Bible goes as far as to say that he died for us while we were still his enemies. So there is no such thing as we are good. Christianity teaches, show me the verse that says that. Jesus does not call children innocent. Not in the way that you think. Children are made innocent not because they are not capable of wickedness and evil. Children are called innocent because they do not yet understand what good and evil is. Again, go back to the Garden of Eden. What did Adam and Eve eat in the Garden of Eden? They ate from the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Not good and evil, knowledge of good and evil. The only reason children are concerned or considered innocent isn't because they can't do evil. They can, absolutely. You see it. If you've ever had children or ever spent time around kids, you know how wicked and evil they can actually be. The difference is that when a child does something naughty, they don't know that it's evil because they don't yet understand it. That doesn't mean they're good. It just means that Jesus and God does not yet hold them accountable for those actions. There's a huge difference. Huge difference. Uses the exact word innocent to describe. He highlights their purity. He does not highlight their purity or their humility. Actually, you might actually be right about the humility. Although that's not exactly what he's highlighting. He highlights their ability to trust. When Jesus says, be like one of these little ones, the message that he gives is that a child is weak. And as a result of that weakness, the child knows how weak they are. So when a child stands next to his mother or his father, right? And the best way to describe this would be in a sort of parable, if you would permit me to use that parable. When a child goes through a river, crossing a river with his father, and the water is pulling on that little child, what does the child do? He grabs onto his father because the child knows that I am incapable of saving myself. So when Jesus says, be like these children, what he's saying is we should hold on to the father in the same way that a child holds on to their father. And when Jesus says whoever misleads one of these little ones astray, what he's talking about is exactly that. Their ignorance. Children will believe anything you tell them. And so it is incredibly important that you do not lead them astray because they'll believe you. It doesn't make them good. It makes them ignorant. They're ignorant of the sin around them. It does not mean they have no sin. It just means that God is just and merciful. And so God is not going to punish you for a sin that you had no ability of knowing that you were committing. Right? You're a child. You don't know that this is wrong. You don't even understand the concept really of right and wrong. You know your dad said you shouldn't do it, but there you're more just afraid of being punished by your dad. You don't yet understand the intricacies of what it means to do right and wrong. There's a huge difference. Because if you make the argument that humans are fundamentally born good, what you are effectively saying is that Jesus didn't have to die on the cross. Because it means that human beings can be good. So then Jesus died for no reason. And we all know that would be heresy. If that is a view that you hold, that is a heretical view. I'm not saying that is the view you hold, but that would be heresy. Children is innocent until they understand the difference between right and wrong. They're declared innocent. They're not innocent. They are guilty of the crime, but the judge declares them innocent because they don't yet understand. It's the same we do in court. When a kid, so a 9-year-old, kills someone, that 9-year-old is not tried as an adult. Why? Because we understand that this kid, whilst guilty of committing the murder, has no ability to understand what they had done. Right? It's the exact same thing. My issue with your statement was merely that you said all humans are born good. That creates a lot of problems. A lot of problems, and it does not, in fact, tie in with Christianity, not with the doctrines, the teachings, the theology, or the Bible. So just so that that is sort of clear. There's no evidence of that. Jesus meant have faith like the young children without wickedness in your heart. Yeah, because children will believe when you tell them. They'll just accept it. They'll just believe it. And we are supposed to be like that. But okay, ultimately, let's get to surely I was sinful at birth, sinful from the time my mother conceived me. Jay will, yeah, good passage there. You explain, no issues. I will consider that carefully. Joe, yeah, of course. I know I come across sometimes as very passionate, and I am a very passionate guy, but I didn't mean that as like a fighting thing. I didn't want to fight with you. But it's super important. Again, I don't know if you're a Christian. Maybe you are, maybe you aren't. But as a Christian, there's a couple of things that um, the entire faith is built upon, right? And one of them is that all are born into sin. We are all born into sin. The second you question that, or the second you remove that, then it means that what happened in the Garden of Eden is now questionable. And if what happens in the Garden of Eden is questionable, Jesus' entire ministry and sacrifice falls apart. There's no reason for Jesus to have died, because Adam and Eve eating the fruit did not ultimately corrupt all humans. It is us that become corrupt because of things that we do. Right? And that creates a whole list of problems. Like theologically, you're going to run in circles trying to figure that out, and you're ultimately going to fail. It's incredibly important that the reasons for why Christ came to die for us is understood in its purest form, and why we needed Christ. Otherwise, it just would not have happened, or otherwise we would have been lost. They had sex in the garden. They did not eat a fruit. It was a metaphor. Specky, I recognize that there's a lot of people who read into it things that didn't that wasn't written there. You can go back to the original Hebrew, and it's a fruit that they eat. Read whatever you need into it, but it's a fruit. The fruit could be a metaphor. It could not be a metaphor. It doesn't matter. It's ultimately that is what the language describes. That's what the language describes. You can inspect it as much as you want. Then explain where Cain and Abel comes from. You do know that they're kicked out of the garden, and only later do you find Cain and Abel. It is entirely plausible and even possible that Cain and Abel were born after the garden, that they were conceived after the garden. Give me the verse. If your argument is that they absolutely had sex in the garden and that is why God punished them, give me the verse. The full verse, where that is exactly what God says. If not, it is your interpretation. And you're welcome to that interpretation. But I am under no obligation to accept your interpretation as anything more than your interpretation. Here we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen. it's difficult to know where to start, right? With this discussion. Now, first, I could play this video for you guys, but listen to this.
Do you think the Reconciliation Project...
Actually, no, wrong video. Where's that other video I wanted to show you guys? Sorry. Yeah, here it is. Here it is. Listen to this.
Yes.
Can you guys hear that?
And believe me, I take
Can you make out what she's saying?
A lot about them.
It's difficult. You
If you
can.
knew anything about my history, you know that perhaps I know.
You can make out what she's saying, but it's incredibly difficult. The video is very bad. Do you guys want to watch the video, or would you just trust me to tell you what she says? Lamborghini, how are you doing, sir? You want to watch this? Okay, most people say they trust me. It's incredibly like the video is very bad because it's taken on a phone, and I don't think the actual quality of the microphone and the sound system is actually that good. So I'll just give you guys a summary. StephanZA admits that South Africa is an experiment. Now, the person who shares this says that StephanZA admits that South Africa is at the center of a globalist experiment. She doesn't say that, right? That's not in her speech, that's sort of tacked on. But what StephanZA does actually say is that South Africa is an experiment that has never succeeded anywhere else in the world. The idea that you take a group of people from different cultures, different religions, different races, different beliefs, and you put them all together in the same country. This is the experiment for South Africa. And StephanZA is specifically talking about how different countries are running their own experiments. So America's experiment is their own experiment. South Africa's experiment is a unique experiment that's never succeeded anywhere in the world before. Now, I'm not going to deal with the idea of globalism or the idea that this is some globalist plot, even though I do believe that. I do believe that South Africa was primarily meant to be a globalist experiment. The World Economic Forum, the Pope, the Catholic Church, they are all involved in this one world religion, one world government idea. This is why the Pope is going around right now and telling the world that Islam is peaceful, that Muslims are peaceful people, that Islam is something, as a religion of peace that the rest of the world can learn from. That's the idea here, right? It's to bring everyone into the same house and everyone shares in the same thing. And South Africa was to be the blueprint of that. But I'll ignore that for the moment. Let's not get into conspiracies. Let's just focus on what StephanZA is saying here. The DA is doing what they're doing and believing what they believe and running the country the way that they are because they are bought into this experiment. StephanZA, Jordan Lewis, the entire organization of the DA is bought into the experiment of, let's call it the Rainbow Nation. And they're committed to making that experiment work. Now, as part of that experiment, there's a couple of things that you should all understand. And for this, I will actually let you listen to at least a part of this.
What do we do? How are we going to make sure that implementation happens of good plans and policies? It's not as if there's a failure of policies, even good plans, but it's a failure.
Okay, this is Rolf Meyer. Rolf Meyer was the lead negotiator for the National Party back in 1992. He's the guy that ultimately sold out white South Africans in the transition phase between apartheid and not apartheid. And by sold out, I do not mean that he oversaw the end of apartheid. Most Afrikaners and South Africans wanted the end of apartheid. The sold out was, and you listen to what he says here, and I'll play you the whole video, right? I'll play you the entire clip so that you can actually hear it. This was always the plan. The constitution that we ended up with, the transition from capitalism or socialism, really what the NP was running, to communism, this was always the plan. Now, for those of you who don't know, Rolf Meyer was, he negotiated the end of apartheid with Cyril Ramaphosa. Cyril Ramaphosa even spoke afterwards and said when the deal was signed, he saw Rolf Meyer dancing. And he thought to himself, why is this guy dancing? Why is he so happy? He lost all of the negotiations. He gave the ANC every single thing that they demanded. Cyril Ramaphosa said he would not have been happy if he was Rolf Meyer, but Rolf Meyer was happy. And then as soon as the new South Africa was born, Rolf Meyer defected from the National Party and joined the ANC. Just so you guys have an idea of who you're dealing with here. Now listen.
Do you think the reconciliation project has failed?
No, it definitely didn't fail.
Those are the kinds of noises that I'm talking about when I ask you, has reconciliation failed? We all want to live in South Africa, but everybody seems to feel unfairly treated in their own country.
I hear what you say and I understand what you say, and I think there is a point in that. Because what we probably failed to do or failed to succeed with is the fact that we didn't complete the socio-economic transformation of the country.
Okay, wait. Napoleon, let's just quickly get one thing straight. Multiracial and multicultural are very different things. Race and culture is not one thing. You have plenty of people of all sorts of races that all join into the same culture. America, up until very recently, were Americans. Most Americans would describe themselves as Americans regardless of what race they were. Race is not the issue. The issue comes with the multicultural part. South Africa was the first, and then towards the end of the 2000s, we started seeing Europe and the rest of the world join. That's why they all joined. Because when they saw that it was reasonably successful in South Africa had not yet descended into civil war, South Africans weren't really trying to kill each other, they thought, okay, it's safe. We can now also start being multiracial or multicultural societies. That's where all of those multiculturalism is a diversity is our strength. Multiculturalism is a strength. That's where all of that comes from. It's after seeing that South Africa did not descend into civil war, because that was the entire experiment. The idea was, if they try this in South Africa and it just leads to endless civil wars, they won't try it again. But when South Africa didn't, they were like, oh, well, then we'll just continue. We'll do the same thing. Right? But the problem is that, and I'll explain why multiculturalism can never work. Why it is an entire pipe dream. I'll get to that.
It's about economics.
Exactly. How people experience their livelihood today.
1-5.
To
do.
So according to this guy, the entire problem in South Africa is economical. Not cultural, nothing to do with work ethic, nothing to do with the way people view the world, nothing to do with criminality and the fact that one subset of the society appear to be criminals at a much higher rate than every other subset of the society. That's not the problem. The problem is economics. It's important. Rolf Meyer is telling you he is a communist. He's admitting it to you. Because this is how communists view the world. The entire world can be boiled down to economics.
What?
to complete the socio-economic transformation as envisaged by the Constitution, because it's there.
To correct the backlog.
Exactly. And it's all contained in Chapter 2 of the Constitution.
Remember, he's the guy that negotiated the Constitution. He made sure that in our Constitution, it gives the ANC the right to oppress white people, take from the white people and give to the black people. This is the man.
Those aspirations. But now it's more than 30 years later, and we have hardly made any progress with regard to that part of the project.
I was thinking about it.
So he's effectively, by the way, the point here, if you watch the whole thing, he's effectively saying that 1994 was part one of the globalist project, the communist project. Part one was get white people to give power to the black people. Part two was to take what the white people had built and hand that to the black people. That was part two. That was supposed to be the next step. So transformation, transferring power and money from one group to the other group. That was the next step. And he made sure that all of that was written into our Constitution.
But
The National Development Plan speaks about aspirations that need to be met.
It's also interesting that they call it the National Development Plan, because that's not its technical term. But of course, they know that the United States will be listening to this, because Rolf Meyer is now the ambassador to South Africa in the United States of America, the ambassador of South Africa to the United States of America. It's not called the NPD or the NDP. It's called the NDR, the National Democratic Revolution. That's the official term for it. But it's revolutions are messy and most people don't like it. So NDP sounds better.
In 2030,
absolutely. It's just 4 years from now. And if
we
you
are
now
nowhere
ask
near.
if you now ask people, even in government, what is the content of the National Development Plan, I don't think they will be able to tell you. Because it's almost as if it was produced, the document, the plan was there, but it was put on a shelf. And we don't see the results. It was not implemented in the way that it was foreseen. So we still...
Listen to this, guys. This is the guy that was supposed to negotiate on behalf of white people in South Africa. This is the man that was sent by F.W. de Klerk to ensure that white people do not live in a country where they will never again have the power to actually impact power and elections. He knew about the plans as they were supposed to be implemented. He was fully on board with the complete sellout of the Afrikaners in South Africa. Fully on board, bought and paid for. None of this is an accident, but we'll get back to how this translates to Helen Zille and all the rest.
Still back at the same question. What do we do? How are we going to make sure that implementation happens of good plans and policies? It's not as if there's a failure of policies, even good plans, but it's a failure of implementation and execution. And let me take you back and remind us all of the fact that we had a referendum in 1992, which F.W. de Klerk called amongst white people only,
yes,
with the consent of Madiba, to say, are you in favor of change or not?
yeah, which way do we go?
In other words, are you prepared to scrap apartheid and to make a new beginning? That was the question, yes or no? And 70% of the white people said yes, but the 30% were there.
And are still here.
And are still here.
Yeah.
And
For their generation.
And they are represented by AfriForum and those.
Listen to that. The 30% who said no, and he's going to go on and say it.
We're thinking that way. So I think it's not only a matter of fear, it's ideological as well. They want to be on their own.
Here.
And those whites, the 30% that voted against change, essentially wanted apartheid to stay.
He's a liar, because that's not why the 30% voted against it. I'm not suggesting that some of the 30% just wanted apartheid. But if you actually go back and you listen to what the 30% that voted against the referendum said, their problem wasn't the end of apartheid. Their problem was the lack of any explanation of what the white man is going to do with this new South Africa, because most people can math. You have a population of 4.5 million versus a population of nearly 40 million at the time. Math tells you that this small population is never again going to be able to influence political power. And so this group said, wait a second, you can't just tell us to give away our country, to give away our guns, to give away our safety and our freedom, and we don't even know how we're going to have power? Like, how are we going to have a say in this system? How are we going to be able to say, look, we don't want this, we don't like this, we would like something else? How are we going to have any sort of negotiating power? And the government never actually told them how this was going to happen. That's why most of them voted no, not because they wanted apartheid to stay forever. They just wanted to know, what is the exact plan in place to ensure that it doesn't just become the tyranny of the mob, which of course is what we live under in South Africa at the moment. White people are at the tyrannical mercy of the mob. Whatever the mob decides to do to white people must accept, because there's no way that white people can outvote or overthrow this government, because they just have more people. But according to this guy, this was all planned. You see, it was never about actually transitioning to a free South Africa. That was never what South Africa or the new South Africa was supposed to be. The new South Africa was an experiment. It was an experiment on, can you have multiple cultures live in the same country? And very specifically, is the world ready for centralized governance? That's South Africa in a nutshell. So when you listen to Helen Zille basically say exactly that, South Africa is a different experiment, there's a couple of things you have to understand. Helen Zille was an anti-apartheid fighter. Helen Zille rubbed shoulders with the Madibas of the world, with the ANC. She was fighting on behalf of those guys, fighting the apartheid government, the National Party. And for that, one could say, in a nutshell or in a vacuum, she should be applauded. But one must ask yourself, was she any different to the ANC? Is the DA any different to the ANC? Because that experiment will not work. It has never worked in the history of the world, and it will not work here. It will not work. And we have said this before. I have explained this before, but multiculturalism doesn't work because most of the elites today don't know what culture is. If you ask the elites what is culture, what will they tell you? Listen to what the Prime Minister of Canada says. He says there's no such thing as Canadian culture. The Prime Minister of England, Starmer, said the same thing. There is no such thing as British culture. The leftists in Britain will tell you what even is British culture, and then they'll point to curry being one of the greatest foods in England. But food is not culture. Drink is not culture. Our individual silly actions is not culture. So what is culture? Culture is the model, the framework through which a people deal with complex problems. That's culture. I read to you guys the definition by Daniel Bell, who framed it much more beautifully than what I ever could. Culture is the idea if you see a bicycle left unattended, do you take the bicycle or not? That's culture. Now, in the modern world, they'll tell you, no, that's just a value. Values do not exist in a vacuum. Values are informed by culture. So, yes, do not take the bike as a value. We don't take the bike. But why don't we take the bike? Because we do not take property that does not belong to us. That's the value. If it's not my property, I don't get to take it. What's the core? My property matters. That's the culture. Because my property matters, there's certain values that flow from that foundational principle that then means I can't take someone else's property because my property matters. Therefore, their property matters. Therefore, their property is not my property to take. My property matters. Therefore, I cannot attack someone. I cannot take their life because my life matters. My life is my property. Therefore, someone else's life matters. These are all from a cultural foundation. It flows into the values that you and I just accept. We don't ask questions about it. I don't have to ask you, and then you need to think about it for a long time. You just know it. It just makes sense to you. Right? Like, that's culture. Now, what happens in a multicultural society? What happens if you live in a society where the individual is not believed to be sacrosanct? There's a fundamental reason why this is important. The West, the European mind, appears to be the only group on earth where the individual has decidedly been declared sacrosanct. It is sacred. The individual, according to the West, is the most important minority. That's why the West is oftentimes considered to be individualist. Because if the individual's rights is not respected, then nothing else matters. The collectivist, on the other hand, which effectively makes up most of the rest of the world, has a very different viewpoint. Because the collective's rights are far more important than the individual. And therefore, under communism, you can kill 1,000 individuals if that means that the rest of the collective is safe. We have a much harder problem with this in the Western world. This is fundamentally also why it is the West that defeats slavery. Not Africa, not the Middle East, not the Far East, but the West. You see, because it took a while, I'll admit, but because the West views the individual to be so important and so sacred, eventually the West does look at the black man and says, but hold on, if I am sacred as an individual made in the image of God, then surely he is sacred as an individual made in the image of God. That is why Britain nearly bankrupts itself to stop the slave trade of both the Barbary states as well as the transatlantic slave trade. Nearly bankrupt themselves. Actually, they did bankrupt themselves. Because the individual matters more than the collective. Right? That's the entire idea. So how can you have cultures where one believes that the individual is sacred merge with cultures where they don't care about the individual at all? And instead, the collective is far more important. How can that ever work on a fundamental level? These values don't mix. There are certain values that really doesn't matter, right? And by the way, this is not a racial thing. I don't believe that it's a racial thing, because you will find black conservatives in America, black conservatives in South Africa who believe the same things. They have heard the culture, they've been brought up in the culture, and they have accepted the culture as the thing that makes the most sense. So it's not racial, it's cultural, and culture can be taught. I'm not one of those people who believe that culture is somehow ingrained in our DNA. I don't believe that. I believe that our culture was shaped by Christianity. And it is ultimately Christianity that has allowed us to become the people that we are. Right? And I believe that as a result of that, anyone can accept the same culture. But if you're going to have a country, and if that country is going to work, everyone has to have the same culture. You can't have a multicultural society, because at some point, the friction within those cultures, the places where those cultures differ, is going to become too great. For example, in the West, we believe that a woman is equal to a man. We believe that there is no value distinction between a man and a woman. This is a belief that is informed by our culture. Because the individual is made in the image of God, that means that all individuals made in the image of God is equal. That's not a value that is shared universally throughout the world. There are plenty of cultures where that value does not exist, where they find that insulting to even begin to imagine that a woman could be equal to a man. Right? And at its core, that's already a big difference. If you take it to its foundational level, it's an even bigger difference. You can't have those cultures. It will never work. The South African experiment will fail no matter who runs it, no matter who rules it. And the DA are bought into the same experiment. The DA doesn't want to fix the broken system that is South Africa. They want to see the experiment through. They want to ensure that where the ANC failed to really make the Rainbow Nation successful, they will make it successful. They will bring success to the Rainbow Nation experiment. How will they do it? Well, we can look at history. We can look at history. What do you do when you have a goal, but there's one part of society that doesn't really want to fit into your goal? How do you deal with that? Anyone want to take a guess? This is how you deal with it. The NDR also seeks to liberate the white community from the false ideology of racial superiority and the insecurities of privilege, thus building a truly non-racial society. I am oppressing you. I am discriminating against you. I am killing you for your own good. Because we are building the Rainbow Nation. And you are standing in the way of this Rainbow Nation. Now, if the Rainbow Nation is the best thing ever, and you are standing against the best thing ever, then killing you is really in service to the best thing ever. When I tell you guys that the DA is an incredibly dangerous political party, and that the DA will be your biggest nightmare, I am not exaggerating. There is only one thing worse than a communist, and that's a competent communist. Because a communist will steal and sort of fiddle about. A competent communist will oppress you absolutely. And in my opinion, the only difference between the ANC and the DA is that one is competent and the other isn't. What do you guys think? Now that I have pissed off all of the DA followers, every single time I say anything negative about the DA, I lose subscribers. Matthew, how you doing, sir? Remember, it's dead and the DA can't see it. True. Desiree, how you doing? I love you, man. Abby, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I am not DA. I agree the DA is too socialist. Saint, how you doing, sir? Or, wait, Saint? Not sure. You're awesome. Thank you. 100% true about the DA. Thank you. I'm fully aware DA is just another mess, but not as bad as ANC. No, I'm not suggesting that the DA, or sentient, there we go. I'm not suggesting that the DA is as bad as the ANC. But if you care about freedom and capitalism and individuality, the DA will be worse. Far worse. Because where the ANC is sort of fiddling about and not entirely sure how to oppress everyone, the DA will be very good on oppressing the people that they do not agree with. Very good. The DA buddied up to the EFF and ANC. Desiree, also not wrong. Not wrong at all. Marlo, how you doing, sir? Luckily, I agree on the DA point. Was DA and realized how socialist they are and literally went against what they campaigned against. It's politics, right? The child is naive and trusting. Margiaso, DA is worse. You won't even know how much they hate you. Canada, question. What would be the alternative to the one man, one vote that we got in 1994, dooming us to oppression of the majority? And what's the alt to multiculturalism? So, Dylan, okay, so first let's deal with the one man, one vote. Actually, I don't even have to deal with them separately because they do actually inform to the same place. There is effectively just one way that you deal with a country like South Africa. In the perfect, if we were to imagine a perfect world, you would have every single tribe go back from whence they came. Right? So you have all the German white people go back to Germany and all the rest of it. The problem is that we don't live in a perfect world. And the bigger issue is that a lot of people who left Europe left because of fundamental disagreements. Right? So even if you were to take all of the Germans, say, for example, and put them back in Germany, they left because they didn't agree with what the Germans were doing. And so putting them back there will just create a new cultural problem. Because while I am German, and I am, by the way, all of my family members, except for one aunt, not one grandmother. So of my 8 grandparents or great-grandparents, only one of them is French. All the rest of them are German. And specifically from Saxony, Germany. Right? So even if you put me back in Germany, I have nothing in common with actual Germans. Nothing. Germans are far too socialist, far too big government, far too trusting of the state, far too weak on individual rights, as far as I'm concerned, to ever be able to live in a country like Germany. I would tear my heart out if I lived in Germany. So you can't put me back in Germany, right? So we're not living in a perfect world. You could probably say all the conservatives go to America, but that's also not going to work. So because we live in a real world, the answer has to be federalization. The founding fathers actually, I've been reading up about the American experiment, and I'm a huge fan of the founding fathers of America, by the way. Just a quick answer. I believe that the founding fathers of America is they are probably the smartest people that have ever lived. If you read the constitutional documents and the constitutional papers and their explanations for what and why the Constitution of America is set up the way that it is, it's genius. But the founding fathers, the original American system, actually was such that most positions of government the ordinary citizen could not vote for. In fact, America despised the idea of one man, one vote. In America, you could not vote unless you were a property owner, right? And even then, there were severe restrictions on what you could actually vote for, because their idea was that you should only ever really care about what is happening directly in your town or city. Nationally, you can't trust people to vote, right? Because nationally, different people are going to have different interests. And how can you, living next to the coast, vote for me that live in the middle of the country? How could your vote override mine? Because we want different things, right? So this idea of a national government deciding what every single province can and cannot do is just, it's impossible. Because every single province is going to have their own things that they care about. They're going to have their own things that they want to prioritize. And so federalization is probably the best bet. And with that, I actually do mean that even the provinces of South Africa needs to be redrawn. South Africa should have 20 plus provinces, not just 9. Because the way the provinces are set up right now also don't make a lot of sense. You have certain groups of people that are completely cut in half by this provincial divide, but they fit better together than what they fit apart. Right, and so most of the provinces should also be completely divided into smaller provinces and given federal powers, so that the government that's local get to decide how they want to govern themselves, with the national government doing the bare minimum, if that. And then you ask the question about culture, right? I recognize that there are some people in South Africa that do want to stick to their own race. I recognize that. And look, if that is you, more power to you. I am happy to allow you to do that, right? If you want to live with just white people or just black people, or maybe you're even more specific. You only want to live with white people that can't tan, for example. By all means, right? Make up your own list of rules for who you want to live with and who you don't, and then go live in those areas. And no one should bother you. You should be completely free to decide where you want to live and how you want to live. I believe that at my core. For me personally, and for my family, what I want is people who think the same as I do. That's the only thing that's important to me. I don't care about your race. Your race could not bother me one bit. I don't give a crap whether your name is some African name, or it's some European name, or it's some indigenous American name, or it's a Latin name, or I couldn't care less. Do you and I agree on the fundamental questions of life? How do you feel about the government? It needs to be small. Good job. How do you feel about the economic system? Capitalism. Good job. How do you feel about marriage? Should be between a man and a woman. Great job. How do you feel about Christ? Love him. Nice. Welcome. That's it. I don't care about anything else. Nothing else really gives me any information about you outside of, if you tell me you're black, all that tells me is that I shouldn't look for a white person, right? But it doesn't inform me on the kind of person that you are. Just saying you're black is completely useless as an indicator of any value, at least in my opinion. So that's where I would want to be, and that's the kind of country that I would want to live in, and I believe that is ultimately the answer to multiculturalism. So you can have South Africa as a multicultural country, insofar as you have many different cultures that live in the Republic of South Africa, but each of these cultures should be free to determine their own futures, their own government systems, their own economic systems, how they want to run. And the founding fathers of America, and this is actually the most beautiful thing, America was originally set up to be 50 tiny experiments. Now, there weren't 50 states at the formulation of the constitutional papers, but they understood that more states would ultimately come join. But the idea was every single state should be its own experiment. So they completely accepted that you might have some states that will be communist. This was communism before there was even communism. But they accepted that that might happen. Every single state is going to have their own experiments, economic experiments, cultural experiments, and all the rest of it. And ultimately, the states will do what is successful. So if one state tries capitalism and sees that it's successful, other states will start to follow. Right? And that's the idea. That is what it's supposed to be. In my opinion, the idea is that you have every single one of these small little groups forming their own futures, deciding on their own experiments, and then borrowing from one another what works and what doesn't. That is, to me, the answer. Does that answer your question, though, then? Christian European Foundation. Wait, okay, who said what? Who said what about Afrikaners? What am I missing? Because it seems like there's some conversation here. Oh, Lord Duck is busy. Is the Afrikaner ethnicity not a result of multiculturalism? In a way, yes, Lord Duck, but it's important to understand what kind of cultures came together to form the Afrikaner ethnicity. So, I'm not sure if you just joined late, right? Or if you didn't hear the preamble to all of this discussion, but let's put it this way. If I took red colored water and blue colored water, could I mix the two? Yeah, it's water, right? So they can mix. They'll form a new color, but they will mix. But what if I took blue colored water and yellow colored oil? Could I mix those? The answer is no. I mean, I could violently make them appear as if they're mixed, but I can't mix them. They won't mix. So when we talk about multiculturalism, in the sense that you're trying to infer, you're talking about different European groups that, for the most part, agree on like 95% of most things. They're all Christian. They all believe in the individual. They all believe, at least at the time that the Afrikaner sort of left Europe, they agree on most things. There's like tiny little disagreements here and there, but for the most part, there's enough agreement that marriages between them would be fairly simple, fairly straightforward. The biggest difference is mostly language. And as a result of that, you take all of these different groups, and what you do end up with is a new group. But you didn't mix water and oil. You just mixed different colors of water to form something new. But it's still water at its core. The issue is when you try and take the Zulu culture and you compare it to the German culture, what you find is that it's a completely incompatible set of cultures. They are not compatible. And so how do you mix them? The answer is violently. And usually what ends up there is the one side completely wipes out the other, or uh, there's just continuous friction between the two because the cultures don't really want to mix, because at their core, they're very different views. Even in Africa, you find certain African cultures that just can't mix. Their views are just so different from one another that they really don't mix. And at their core, they hate each other because of these cultural differences. And how do you mix those cultures? The answer is you can't, because you're dealing with oil and water here. There's foundational modalities that needs to be the same. We need to be able to look at a problem in society and find a common solution that both of us find palatable. The issue is when we come to the modalities and the issues of society, and our models are completely different. We come to completely different ideas of how to solve these problems. That can't work. It just can't. Take, for example, the English South African, or the English white people versus the Afrikaans white people in South Africa. We are not the same. We don't have the same culture, right? We like different things. We sort of hang out in different ways, and there's different cultural differences. When you look at the English and the Afrikaans, you can actually see it. If you spend time with English people and you spend time with Afrikaans people, there's clear differences. But would most of you agree that we kind of coexist quite nicely? Like, you can marry an English South African girl tomorrow and life will be good. You two will be fine together. Grace and Forgiveness, how are you doing? Right, you'll be perfectly fine. Because at the core, you're very similar. Now, you can even have that in now, 32 years later. You will most likely find, and you do actually find, white men who marry black women, black men who marry white women, who the cultures have come close enough together where it kind of works. But you will find in every single one of those relationships, one fundamentally changed their culture. One of the two fundamentally had a culture change. So I know, for example, a guy, white guy, is married to, I believe she's a Sepedi lady. But if you meet her, you honestly, if you just spoke to her, so you couldn't see her, you'd think it's a white lady. The way she speaks, the way she thinks. Her parents ensured that she went to an Afrikaans school, that she went to an Afrikaans high school, that she went to an Afrikaans university, that she had mostly just white friends. Her parents went out of their way to ensure that she would grow up in white culture, so to speak. And so she grew up in white culture, right? Now, she can marry anyone she wants because ultimately it works. Their cultures are the same. There's no difference. But if you go to someone who lives in, rural KwaZulu-Natal, who still upholds the culture of the Zulu, you're going to find it very difficult to take a woman from, say, rural KwaZulu-Natal and have her marry a Burki from Limpopo. Trust me, I'm from Limpopo. I can tell you now that's not working. Well, cultures can mix successfully, but saying multiculturalism can't exist is not the same as saying... so, Lord Duck, multiculturalism, in the way that people want to imagine it. So, the way the globalists like to think of multiculturalism cannot exist. Because the globalist idea of multiculturalism is that culture is just a construct. Culture is a superficial, sort of skin deep little thing. It doesn't really matter. You don't have to pay attention to from where do you get your refugees? From where do you get your immigrants? This doesn't matter. It's superficial. It's a social construct. That kind of multiculturalism cannot exist. If you want to bring people into your country, you have to be very careful from where do you bring them. Who are these people that's coming into your country, and are they compatible with the people of your country? And I'm not making a value statement here, just to be clear. I'm not suggesting for 1 second the people in the Middle East are less valuable than people in the West. Because I would make the exact same argument for a country in the Middle East. You cannot open your borders without problems to people in the West. Because you're going to end up with problems. Guaranteed that it's going to create issues. Maybe not right now, but in time, give it 50 years, give it 60 years, you're going to have a serious problem. Can't work. There are some cultures that just don't mix. It's not because one culture is superior to another. It's that I have certain things that I expect from my fellow man. I expect from my fellow man. For example, if a politician takes a gun and shoots it into the air in the middle of a crowded space, it doesn't matter whether or not I supported that politician. It doesn't matter even if I like that politician. That politician should go to jail. Now, if you are willing to overlook the crimes of that politician because he happens to look like you, then you and I do not share compatible cultures. Because in your culture, as long as the person looks like you and says things that you like, he can be a criminal. I'm sorry, but I don't want to share a country with you because my culture is not compatible with yours. I have fundamental disagreements with that viewpoint. And it is once again individualism versus collectivism. Julius Malema's crimes must be forgiven because he is good for the group. And so if Julius Malema killed 5 people shooting a gun recklessly into the air, it's still better that he stays free because he fights for the African child. Which of course he doesn't. He fights for himself, but never mind, they wouldn't know that. Whereas I don't follow that mantra. I like Corneille Mulder. I think he's a good politician. If Corneille Mulder broke the law tomorrow, he must go to jail. It's simple. If Corneille Mulder got onto a stage and started firing a gun into the air, he must go to jail. I don't care what good he's doing for the Afrikaner people. I don't care. It's as simple as that. I don't agree with where I agree. With where I agree with who? So you're absolutely right. The destruction of individual or group culture is the destruction of humanity, and that's exactly what the globalists want. We got to stop being so stupid. Surely I agree with that. Being reckless how, Marlo? What am I being reckless about? Black South Africans who grew up in suburbs are incompatible with rural Black South Africans with traditional religious beliefs. James, this is why I said culture is not racial. The problem is that there's this idea when people hear culture, they immediately see race. And I don't blame people for that. You know, it's sort of, if I tell you Zulu, you all have an image in your heads of what a Zulu looks like, right? If I say the word boer, what's the image that pops into your head? Right? You can't really help it. It's sort of automatic because that's what you normally see. But culture isn't racial. Culture is a system of rules and modes of existence that is taught to children. And I believe that you can take any child, no matter what race they are, And you can teach them a different culture, but you must want to. It's not going to happen automatically. And there is an age whereby I think it's almost impossible to teach. Because once the sort of basic framework has been laid down, I think it becomes very difficult to teach it. Do not conflate worldview or ideology with culture, not the same thing, regardless of overlap. Marlo, I explained to you, communism is not culture. No. But some cultures are far more adaptable to communism than others. Because if you are culturally predisposed to the idea that the group is more important than the individual, communism is going to make sense to you. It's going to fundamentally make sense to you. So communism in some cultures just work. They don't understand why it wouldn't work. Communism has never worked in the West. Even those who have tried have had to water it down, and we're now on about the fourth attempt by the Western world to try and get to central planning. I think they're hoping that they have done enough damage to the cultures in Europe that they will just accept it. But you're already seeing the sort of the sparks of revolution in Europe. I believe that Europe will have a civil war long before central planning is even implemented in its entirety in Europe. So you are correct, right? And my idea, or it's never been my intention to say that culture is the same as ideology, but some cultures are more predisposed to certain types of ideologies. And values flow directly from culture. Values do not stand indistinct from culture. So if you look at a person breaking the law and you argue that that person is fine because that person serves a greater purpose somewhere else, I have to believe that that value stems from a certain culturally held belief. Because I couldn't do that. I could not do that. That's not to say that you can't get people to do some crazy crap. Let's be very real. It is possible to get people to do crazy crap, even if it goes against their culture. But you do actually see the limitations of it, right? You do see the limitations that culture has, but also the limitations of what you can convince people based on certain cultures. Now, Marla, thank you for sort of pushing me to be careful with my wording, because I do think it's important. So often in these sort of conversations, it's easy to sort of become us versus them. And because I don't script anything, it's also very easy for me to say things in a way that I don't necessarily think about, right? Lord Duck, take care of yourself, sir. So I didn't really think about all the ways in which a specific thing that I said could be perceived. Because I'm not scripting, I'm just talking, and in between I'm also reading what you guys are saying, and then I'm also, sort of thinking about what I need to say next. So there's like a whole bunch of stuff that goes on at the same time. So it's nice when you guys do go, whoa, bro, what do you mean? Did you mean to say that? Am I understanding you correctly here? So I do appreciate you guys actually, calling me out and saying, bro, that doesn't sound correct. Is that what you actually meant? So that I can clarify and be like, no, absolutely, or no, absolutely, right? Whatever the case may be. Bring your point of culture over in a country where we've been so successfully divided by a government for who racism is their ballot sheet. Surely, again, you're not wrong. You are not wrong. Oil is busy crashing, $80 a barrel. Something must have happened. I wonder what. That's interesting. I mean, look, if President Trump is capable of destroying Iran and bringing oil down, wow, man, that's like the ultimate victory. Culture is also morality. Morals come from Desiree. Yeah, I believe so. As I said, I believe that faith is the basic framework, the basic foundation, and from that foundation is the framework of culture. So culture is the framework built upon the foundation of faith. Whatever that foundation is going to determine what frame can be built on top of it. Dude, I'll be honest with you guys in this. I'll finish on this. But there is a sort of spiteful glee with which I hope that President Trump is super successful in Iran. I think he is going to be, but obviously economics is wildly unpredictable. But I want President Trump to be successful in Iran for two purposes. The one is so that the Democrats can look ultra stupid. And two, so that the Marxist right can look ultra stupid. If we could get that, man, would I be a happy man. Would I be such a happy man. And then, of course, you also put on top of that, if we could live in a world without Iran, that's a great world to be a part of. You know, that's the kind of world that I would dream of. But all right, ladies and gentlemen, and yeah, God bless President Trump. God bless America. And to be fair, God bless South Africa, because I do believe a free South Africa, a South Africa that actually allows its people to seek its own happiness. Dude, you guys have no idea how powerful South Africa can be. You have no idea. South Africa has everything it needs to explode. You know, we can be such a powerful nation if we just had a government that allowed people to go. Well, Trump did just effectively take Venezuela. Lots of oil there, almost like the whole thing was by design. China is now asking Iran to capitulate and open the strait. Rich Walker, I'm going to have to go check on all of this information, but it is interesting. I'm not sure when the oil from Venezuela is coming onto the market, but if it is, that does make 100% sense. CJ Lishi, how you doing? God bless South Africa. Even our constitution says it. I want South Africa to prosper. I want a government that leaves ordinary South African citizens alone so that we can actually make this country work. Think about the things that we have done with a government that sits on our necks 24/7, slowing us down. Now imagine what we can do if the government just left us alone. Imagine what this country would be. I used to believe SA would become a great, wonderful country. Sadly, they've messed it up. We will become one. Give us time. We're fighting. We're fighting hard. Just give us time. Do not give up on us. I promise you, we will be back. We've been through a lot in this country. You know, we've been through a lot. We've endured a lot. White people endured a lot of suffering at the hands of the Brits, and during multiple wars with multiple groups. Black people endured a lot during apartheid. What we now need is for black people and white people who care about freedom and capitalism and conservatism and Christianity to come together and say, right, let's go. And if that happens, this country will just be unleashed like you've never seen before. God bless SA. Gotta go. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for hanging out with me, for spending your Friday afternoon with me. I hope you had a wonderful time. As always, be good to each other. Be kind to each other. God bless you. God bless South Africa. And I will see all of you in the next one. Peace.